Welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan, which this is my fourth today and I've no moaned in one yet. New world record. The topic of this 10-minute smile is the actual chance that before the kids finish their summer holidays, we could have a Scottish election. Now, bear with me here. And just before I start, give us a thumbs up, please, on the video. Just click the wee thing, the thumb down there. It helps the channel no ends. Now, what's happened today is Douglas Ross has declared he is going to call a confidence vote in Humza Yousaf. That is likely to happen early next week, probably Tuesday. He only needs 25 people in the houses of Holyrood houses, I don't know, and the Parliament in Holyrood to put that motion to Parliament. If in that motion he wins and there is no confidence voted for Humza, he has to stand down and offer his termination of his appointment as First Minister. What happens next? The Parliament, have 28 days in which they have to nominate and have accepted a new First Minister. Now, when you now realise that the SNP don't have a majority because they no longer have a coalition with the Greens, it's no the shoe-in it was a year ago when Humza was nominated as the only nomination to be the First Minister and was subsequently voted through. So, the first thing the SNP need to do is decide who their new leader's going to be. And then that person has to get put up for election, basically, by the whole of Parliament, where they must get the majority of Parliament to vote them as the First Minister. Let's say, for example, it was Kate Forbes. There is not a hope in hell that the Greens are going to vote for her. They just couldn't do it. So we would then start again, we would put somebody else up, and the sitting government have got 28 days, or the Parliament, 28 days to agree to a new First Minister. The two things can happen in that time. They can either agree to one which is debatable, or they can get to a point where 66% of them, I think that's 85 or 86 MSPs, decide before the 28 days is up, we ain't going to be able to agree to a First Minister, and that would call an election. If they get to the end of the 28 days and they've not been able to vote in for an acceptable First Minister, that would automatically generate an extraordinary election where we would vote on all the MSPs and would start again. Now, that's the unknown because this is unprecedented, this hasn't happened before. But in normal circumstances, you would have a 5-week window for an election. Bearing in mind that we could potentially have ran for 28 days without a First Minister and quite an odd time for the Scottish Parliament to run without a Scottish Minister, and in fact, they've not got a government, they've not got an operating body. You would probably want that timescale to be short as possible. So we need to give them about 4 weeks to try and argue a new First Minister. If that fails, we then would probably have another 5 weeks to organise up to an election, which means we could have an election for the Scottish Parliament before the schools finish up for the summer. This is crazy. This has been brought about by the 100 Rainbow Greens pushing for the end of the Butte House Agreement, and the whole thing snowballed from there. So we're in a position where the Scottish people could be deciding on a new government before the kids finish for summer holidays. I'm lapping this up. What's the probability? Well, I think there's a good probability that Humza will not win the confidence vote next week. Because why would he? The Labour, the Tories, and Liberal Democrats have already said how they will vote in this confidence vote. The only question is, how would the Greens vote? But I have learned that they don't need a majority of MSPs to vote for it. They only need a majority of those that vote. So it's not ridiculous to consider the SNPs could just abstain, in which case it becomes easier and or it actually helps rather than vote. But it's not also ridiculous to consider that some SNP backbenchers, the rebellious ones, could either vote against them or abstain as well. Now, that's probably going to make it quite likely that Humza Yousaf will fail in a confidence vote. Then we need to consider who could they put up that would pacify those in their own party and at least one other party in the Holyrood to get a First Minister selected. And I can't think of anybody, because the only person I can think of that's probably strong enough to be a First Minister in their whole party just now is Kate Forbes. And as I've already said, I think it's 0% chance of the Greens voting for her. I can't think of anybody else. Some people have suggested Stephen Flynn might be making a move to be the party leader, which may or may not be true. Regardless if that's true or not, he is not an MSP and therefore cannot stand for the role as First Minister. Impossible that he could do that. It's got to be somebody that's already sworn in as an MSP. So I think it's quite probable that they'll fail in the vote of confidence, and they would fail to make others happy enough in Parliament to agree to a First Minister. And if those two things happen, we're heading for an election. And the total bizarre thing is, people like myself have been saying, look, come the Westminster election, let's tactically vote, get SNP to lose some MPs and a chunk of money, and then in a couple of years' time, we'd repeat that with Westminster. We could actually now be looking at a situation where we've got a Holyrood election before we've got a Westminster election. And this is fantastic news for Unionists, because my only concern about the order Westminster and then Holyrood was, I was thinking, if Humza loses too many seats in the Westminster election, they'll get him papped, and they'll have maybe somebody better than him for 2 years run up to the Scottish election that could swing voters back towards him. But if we're going to have a vote in 9 weeks, they're finished. Genuinely. And I'm really actually excited about this prospect, that just putting all the information into my head, it's took a wee bit of time for it all to process. And I've made a few phone calls to people that are more learned than me, i.e. ex-MSPs who kind of know how these things work, to get some insight into what actually happens next. And I'm now more confident that we'll actually have a summer election. I think it's more probable that we'll have a summer election for the Scottish Parliament than not. And we, Scottish people, please listen carefully, could finish the SNP before Christmas. And what a relief that would be, and let proper politicians get on with the job. And what I'll be doing is I will be tactically voting in the next 2 elections, and that could be as soon as 9 weeks from now. It is phenomenal that we might have this opportunity, all down to the cash report. And if we do it right, and we slash the amount of seats they've got in Holyrood, and then slash the amount of seats they've got in Westminster, we could have 2 elections before the year's out. They have no income. How could they survive? That is my first prime target, to absolutely nullify the SNP. After that, we can then worry about how the Scottish Parliament looks going forward, and what we do to get a Parliament that actually just does what's best for Scotland and doesn't talk about independence and blame everybody else for 17 years, because that's what we've had. And then, and only then, would I be looking at new parties and smaller parties having some say in Scotland. To get rid of the SNP, we need people to vote for the traditional parties, whether that's Labour, Tory or Lib Dem in certain areas in Scotland, because they've got the chance of getting rid of them, the biggest amount of damage. Once that's done, we can then look at our Parliament and say, right, how do we sort this forever? And we'll get 5 years to sort that bit out. We'll get 5 years to have a Parliament with big boy pants on that doesn't talk about independence every day and blaming Westminster every second day. We actually just got on with governing Scotland. And then hopefully we can have a rise of your reforms and your family parties and all these types of, sort of newer parties, and line them up for 5 years' time, when hopefully there's no threat at all from the SNP. So there we go. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, please do so. Most importantly of all, unless you're Humza Yousaf, any of his cabinet, or any of the cult that's still left supporting SNP, everybody else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.